Thank you very much to our Dean. And sabi nga niya, mamimili kayo kung sino sa apat ang freshman ng 1971, 72, 73. So may disclosure ako kasi first year of teaching ko 1972. So that was the time when martial law at yun ang kasagsagan ng tinatawag nating nationalist fervor in the university, ang ating first quarter storm, at ang makasaysayang papel ng Universidad ng Pilipinas nitong dekada ng 1970s. Kaya yun ay bibigyan natin ng pagbalik-tanaw sa ating tatalakayin sa araw na to. I'd just like to call your attention to the pamphlet. So makita natin na may papel na ginagampanan ng ating third world studies at ang talakayan natin ay maaari ninyong sundan. Meron pong mga white sheets, blank sheets of paper that are available at the registration desk. And some of you might want to pass it down to the others from the door so you can write your questions, and there will be some staff from the Third World Studies program to collect the questions from you and to give it to me during the open forum. But we would like to encourage our students to take the boldness, katulad ng katapangan namin ng mga dekada 1970s, na tumayo at magpayag ng mga katanungan. Our speakers will have 25 minutes to speak, and you can prepare your questions immediately thereafter. So ang unang-una po nating tagapahayag ay ang ating guro mula sa Departamento ng Linguistics. Tignan ko lamang po ang bahagya ng kanyang kasaysayan, ng kanyang buhay, at baka hindi po tayo matapos sa kanyang kasaysayan ng nasyonalismo at mas mahaba pa sa kanyang talk. He is currently Associate Professor at the Department of Linguistics of this college and Acting Chair for the Commission of the Filipino Language or Commission ng Wikang Pilipino. At siya ay nanguna sa pagbibigay ng direksyon sa ating paggamit ng ating lengguwahe. His recent publications include Balangkasan sa Pilipino, isang panimulang pag-aaral, and ang isa pa nito ay Starting Where the Children Are, a collection of essays on mother tongue-based multilingual education and language issues in the Philippines. And he also has done work on Filipino databases and their applications to educational institutions in the Philippine Educational Research Journal. So, ladies and gentlemen, mga kaguruan at mga mag-aaral, tangkilikin po natin si Professor Nolasco.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ang ID number ko ay 72-2877. At medyo, nung pumasok kami nung 1972, mga ilang buwan lang, nag-declare na ng martial law. At mapalad siguro ako na makita kung anong sitwasyon bago dineclare yung martial law at pagkatapos. Pag-uusapan ko ngayon yung mother tongue-based multilingual education. And I'd like to start off by these slides. Next slide, please. Okay. Laging pag pinag-uusapan natin yung Philippine education, laging nasa crisis. At ito yung dahilan kung bakit. Sa bawat 100 na bata na pumapasok sa grade 1, 86 lang yung nag-grade 2, yung 49 na lalagas. By the start of grade 4, 76 na lang. By the end of grade 6, only around 70%. Or around, more exactly, mga 68%. Next slide, please. Of this, 58 will go to high school, only 42 will graduate 4 years later. Ang cohort survival rates natin ay 66% for the last 8 years. 43% will graduate on time, but 25% will finish the cycle in 9.6 years. At itong dahilan kung bakit marami nagda-drop out. Next slide. Gaano kalayo tayo sa tinatawag na Millennium Development Goals para sa edukasyon. Makikita na po natin yung isang net enrollment ratio. Okay? Noong 1990, 84.6, halos hindi nagbago. Ganun din sa primary completion rate. Tumaas nga, no? Pero mas lumalala, no, habang tumatagal. No? At ang literacy rate natin ay stagnant dun sa 96.6%. Next slide, please. Okay. So ito yung number of years na tinatansya natin na napakalayo natin sa MDG. No? Ang MDG ay 2015, no? At mukhang aminado na yung gobyerno na hindi tayo makakarating doon. Next slide. Okay, next slide please. Okay. Ngayon, dahil sa kasamaan ng edukasyon, posible na magkaroon ng reading without understanding. No? Nakakatawa to kasi nakakabasa tayo, no? Pero hindi tayo nakakaunawa. Ibig sabihin nito, marunong mag-decode yung mga bata, no? Pero hindi nila maintindihan yung kanilang binabasa. No? Sa bawat 3 Pilipino, isa yung hindi nakakaintindi ng kanilang binabasa. Para sa mahihirap, no? Mas malala ito sa 1 out of 2. Next slide. Okay, meron tayong mga levels of literacy. No? Yung level 1, yung pinaka-basic, marunong bumasa at saka sumulat. No? Yung level 2, marunong bumasa, sumulat at magkwenta. Level 3, marunong bumasa, sumulat, magkwenta at saka makaunawa. No? At yan yung mga figures for 2003. Yung FLEMS ay Functional Literacy Education and Mass Media Survey. No? Pag tin-translate po natin yung 86.4% na yan sa buong Pilipinas na marunong magkwenta, of course, yung 14% niyan ay hindi marunong magkwenta. At umaabot yan sa 9 na milyong Pilipino. No? Pag tinignan natin yung level 3, 69.9%. So 30% ang hindi nakakaintindi ng kanilang binabasa. Umaabot po yan sa 20 million. Next slide. Next slide please. Next slide. O, ito yung survey questions para malaman kung marunong ka magkwenta o marunong kang makaunawa ng iyong binabasa. So, may 2 questions na yan, no, doon sa 2003 o 2008. Okay. So, pag nasagot mo yan, no, meron kang computation skills. No? Of course, yung number 1 is addition, no? Or multiplication. Number 2 yung division. Next slide, please. Ito yung survey question to gauge comprehension skills. At kung babasahin ninyong maigi, yung sagot nandiyan na. Okay? Pero gaya nga ng nabanggit ko, mga 20 milyong Pilipino ang hindi nakasagot ng tama yan. No? Incidentally, merong opportunity yung mga bata o yung mga sinurvey kung aling wika yung gagamitin nila. Okay? At so hindi ibig sabihin nito, kung gusto mong kunin yung survey sa Ilocano o sa Bicol, no, magagawa mo yan. Next slide, please. Okay. Pag elementary graduate ka, hindi rin sigurado na may literacy, functionally literate ka, no? Ayon dun sa FLEM survey. So, 19%, more or less mga 1 out of 5 na elementary graduates, hindi functionally literate. At kapag high school, makatungtong ka ng high school, hindi rin garantiya yun. Next slide, please. Okay, ito yung mga national achievement test, no? Puro mga malulungkot na balita ito, no? Na makikita natin na overall, alam nyo, merong ginawa yung DepEd na mga classification. Pag nakakuha ka ng 75% pataas, you will be considered as having mastery of the curriculum. Okay? Pero alam naman natin, 75% yun yung pasang-awa. No? And yet, 2.8% lang ng seniors. Siyempre, wala kayo dito, no? Kasi nasa UP kayo. No? Next slide, please. Okay, pag binaba natin yon sa 50%, ilan yung papasa ron? 33%, no? Yung of all seniors who did pass. No? Next slide, please. Okay, ito yung mga NCAI results, no? Okay, next slide. Eh, madalas sabihin, no? Ay, nung panahon ng mga Amerikano, mas magaling kami. No? Eh, grade 5 pa lang kami, nagtuturo na kami. No? Totoo man yun, pero hindi sinasabi na 1 out of 4 ang nakatutungtong lang ng grade 5. Okay? At sa makatwid, sino yung mga pumapasa nito? Number 1, yung anak ng mayayaman. Number 2, yung talagang matalino. So malayo ito dun sa ano. Next slide, please. Okay, ito yung teams, ito yung trends in mathematics and science study. Maraming beses nang sumulat si Dean Tan tungkol dito, no? At makikita ninyo, laging nasa top 5 tayo, top 3 tayo, pero counting from the bottom, no? So 1995, 1998, 2003, lumahok tayo, no? At pagkatapos nito, hindi na tayo sumali after that. Okay? Kasi masyado nang malinaw, no? Next slide, please. Ito yung mga teams, items sa grade 4 na ito, tinatanong lang yung graph, ano? Medyo maliit, no? Next slide, please. Okay, ito yung overall, yung percent correct across that, yung tungkol dun sa item na yun, no? Nasaan ba tayo? Nasa fifth from the bottom, no? 64 ang nakasagot, no? Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Oh, nung 2008, akala natin, ano kaya pa lahukin natin yung mga science high schools natin? Sino yung taga Quezon City Science League? Mga Kisay, mga Pisay, no? O ito, nung hindi nyo naman siguro inabot ito, no? Pero nung 2008, lumahok tayo dyan sa advanced math, no? At sa awa ng Diyos, number 10 tayo, no? Yung lowest, no? Tayo yung pinaka kahit yung mga Pisay natin, hindi makakompete dun sa mga scores, no? Okay, next slide please. At laging sinasabi ng teams, no, nung lahat ng mga teams na yan, ng mga surveys, sinasabi na students who spoke the language of test at home had higher math and science achievement. Number 1 yung Pilipinas sa paggamit ng wika na hindi natin sariling wika sa buong mundo. Okay? Number 1 ang Pilipinas. Kaya nga tuwing yung maraming pumupunta abroad at nalalaman nila na ang language of instruction ay English, no? Hindi makapaniwala yung maraming tao. Next slide. Next slide. Naulit yata ito. Sige pa. Sige pa. Okay. Ito lang yung summary natin. The English-dominated education system has condemned many of our children to failure and as a consequence to a life of poverty. No? Ilang minuto pa ba? May nagta-time ba?
45 minutes
Okay, sige. When he declared martial law, Ferdinand Marcos ushered in the bilingual setup of using 2 second languages, but mostly English as medium of instruction. Marcos saw education as his primary vehicle to perpetuate the authoritarian values of his new society, with disastrous historical consequences. Rather than promote genuine literacy, the bilingual policy only exacerbated the deepening crisis in our education system. It took us 40 years before realizing the folly of that policy. The DepEd has replaced it with a new one called Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education. But despite the change in name, functional illiteracy, and poor quality instruction continue to victimize us like the plague. Language in education research worldwide has consistently shown that students learn better and faster when they are taught in their first language or L1. The best results are achieved when the L1 is used for at least 6 to 8 years as learning medium, and the L2 or second language is taught strongly to non-native learners before the L2 becomes the medium of instruction or MOI. On the other hand, the worst results have been recorded whenever children begin education in the L2 or when they are exited early after 2 or 3 years of L1 education. It is unfortunate that education authorities in designing the K-12 curriculum have remained ambivalent about the research on language and education. Under the new K-12 curriculum, an early exit program, already discredited by international studies, has been put in place in which the L1 will be implemented as MOI only up to grade 3, followed by an abrupt transition to L2s in grade 4. Cognitive development and language development are inextricably tied. We cannot think in a language that we don't know. In developing deeper thinking skills, we must use a language that allows us to examine ideas and articulate our own thought processes. Those thinking skills will transfer to other languages once L2 fluency is developed enough to express thoughts and ideas. But beginning education by assuming that learners can learn to think and speak well in 2 new languages at the same time is incongruous. The right pedagogy is to let all Filipino learners develop their critical faculties using the language they already think in. As we do this, we can teach them the required second languages as separate subjects until such time that we can transition L1 thinking and learning to the L2s without abandoning and forgetting their L1. I am extremely disappointed by the headlong rush of the DepEd to implement MTB-MLE, quote-unquote, in all public schools this coming school year, even if this directive covers only kindergarten and grade 1. All those responsible directly and indirectly for the issuance of Department Order Number 16, Series of 2012, deserve the strongest condemnation. First of all, the new curricula for kindergarten and grade 1, which integrates the learner's L1 as subject and medium of instruction, have just been finalized but have not been pre-tested by planners. Teachers are being herded by the hundreds into week-long camps only to be trained haphazardly by instructors who are mostly unfamiliar with the new program. Materials in the local languages are being produced without the benefit of pre-testing and are not graded according to levels of difficulty, and they are not evaluated for quality. No systematic assessment and evaluation of the programs in the so-called 921 MTB-MLE pioneer schools have been undertaken, and yet the good and well-intentioned Education Secretary is being made to believe otherwise. DepEd is risking far too much in this haphazard and careless approach to implementing MTB-MLE. The learner's linguistic and cultural worldview should be overtly integrated into the curriculum. Foreign content, English songs, poems, rhymes, word examples that do not reflect or build on what the learners know should be replaced. Foreign literature and culture translated into the L1 simply will not do. Neither will Tagalog materials translated into the L1 suffice. For MTB-MLE to succeed, the production of original stories and materials that are reflective of the values, culture, history, and ideology of the community and of the nation cannot be avoided and must be carried out in earnest. Late last year, there has been some bit of good news relating to the K-12 bill. As you may have read in the papers, the K-12 bill has been approved on third and final reading at the House of Representatives. To me, what is remarkable about this bill is not the goal of adding a couple of years to basic education, but its MTB-MLE provisions. The bill provides that for kindergarten and for grades 1 to 3, the regional or native language of the learner shall be used for instruction, teaching materials, and testing. From grades 4 to 6, there shall be a language transition plan so that Filipino and English are gradually introduced until these languages can become the primary modes of instruction in high school. The transition plan addresses somewhat a critical flaw in Department Order Number 16, which limits L1 use up to grade 3 only. The other laudable provisions of the bill are: the science subject will now be introduced in grade 1 instead of grade 3. This subject will also be taught in the L1 of the learners and not in English. In the past, some people had this silly notion that by integrating science into the language subject, pupils will learn English. The basic curriculum shall be adapted locally to the language and culture of Filipino learners, including community values, to aid teachers in planning their lessons. The production and development of locally produced teaching materials shall be encouraged, and approval of this material shall devolve to the regional and division education units. Big books, primers, and other teaching aids in the local languages are continuously being developed by teachers and other community stakeholders, but production is hampered by the long and tedious process of evaluation and approval from Imperial Manila. Finally, Filipino Sign Language is now recognized as the learning medium in educating the deaf. This proposal actually reiterates a DepEd special education policy way back in 1997. If finally carried out in practice, this will make education in our country inclusive to a sizable community whose learning rights have long been trampled upon by the dominant hearing population. There is one major weakness of the K-12 program that critics have pointed out, and which I am in complete agreement with. DepEd should have factored in enough time, say 3 years, for building capacity and resources to fully implement its flagship programs. Otherwise, the K-12 bill is a good bill, though it is not a perfect bill. Last night, the Senate has just approved its K-12 version. This version, unfortunately, does not contain any of the MTB-MLE features that the House version has. In fact, the Senate version opts for the dreadful short exit scheme of L1 use for 3 years. The Senate's K-12 version is moving closer and closer to colliding with the prominent MTB-MLE features of the House version. One possible means to prevent such an occurrence is to convince the bicameral committee to accept the MTB-MLE and FSL amendments of the House measure. I humbly appeal to UP to take its stand in the language and education issues confronting the country according to findings from the international and national research, and not based on intuition and romantic nationalistic slogans. I am confident that when UP leaders make their appeal on this very historic measure, our leaders will have no alternative but to listen. Thank you, and Diyos te ang ina.